Ever wondered how children really learn in their early years? What sparks their curiosity and what engages them? Foundational years are not just about learning letters and numbers. They are the building blocks for all future learning. For over a decade, Language and Learning Foundation has worked to strengthen foundational learning through effective classroom practices and system strengthening initiatives. Drawing on this experience, we bring to you LLF Speaks Season 2, a 10-episode podcast series where we engage with global and national voices to explore crucial subjects, contributing to improving FLN outcomes. Stay tuned to deep dive on how to do FLN, conversations on building foundational learning at scale.
Hello, welcome back to Season 2 of LLF Speaks. I'm Supriya Ghosh from Language and Learning Foundation, Senior Academic Specialist. And today we are joined by Dhir Jhingran, Founder and Executive Director of Language and Learning Foundation. Hi Dhir.
Hi Supriya.
So today we are going to talk about one of the crucial topics that is discussed in foundational literacy and numeracy, which is structured pedagogy. So to begin this conversation, Dhir, I would want for you to let the audience know what is structured pedagogy and why does it matter?
Thanks, Supriya. I think this is an important question because structured pedagogy means different things to different people. At a very high level, I would say that structured pedagogy includes key elements that are highly aligned and work together to provide a sequence and structure to what happens inside the classroom during teaching and learning. Some examples of these key elements are a clear learning outcomes framework, children's learning materials including workbooks, teacher guides with daily or weekly lesson plans, a design to formative assessments. And these key elements should be supported by a high-quality teacher professional development program that helps teachers adopt these structured practices. Therefore, the focus should be highly on demonstration and practice during these professional development programs. And of course, an ongoing teacher support program for mentoring. This is at a high level. Of course, structured pedagogy designs will be quite different depending on different contexts. As I said, this is a high-level summary of what structured pedagogy can be. But let's get into more details, Supriya. And I have a question for you. How does structured pedagogy actually define what happens inside classrooms?
That is a very interesting question. So the way I look at what is happening or what should happen in classroom within structured pedagogy, I think three words come to my mind, which is clarity, responsiveness, and a rhythm. So when I say clarity, structured pedagogy would provide clarity to teachers around what is the lesson plan goal or objective. So teachers are well prepared with what to be done. You know, they know what to be done, what materials to be followed, and what steps are to be done to ensure that the daily instructional objective or lesson goals are achieved. So that's the first part of it. The second is rhythm. So when you enter in a classroom where structured pedagogy is really happening well, you will see that children are at ease because they're very familiar with what is to happen, how is the classroom going to move around, and there's predictability. So there is a certain rhythm that a particular thing will happen, followed by a certain thing, and then something, and maybe end with a particular thing. So that's the rhythm of it. And when I say responsiveness, teachers are constantly doing check for understanding. So teachers would teach, pause, see if all children are at pace, are learning, or whether or not the teacher will have to make some adjustment in teaching or maybe support a set of children. So that's how I look at structured pedagogy in classroom. And coming into the details of it. So if you walk in, you will see approximately 5 things happening in a classroom, which is the classroom would begin with a warm-up activity. And this warm-up activity will be probably a short story, a poem, a puzzle, a counting number song, or some sort of energizer, so to speak. That helps children to settle in and also activate prior knowledge depending on how teacher has planned the lesson. So that's the first step. The second thing that we will see is modeling. Teacher would demonstrate and model what is to be taught and really give a schema of how a skilled reader should work, or how a skilled writer would do or problem solve. So that's modeling. It is then followed by guided practice. Children now have, after demonstration, children start taking ownership with teacher scaffolding. So students try out or engage in practice of what has been taught, either individually or in small groups or pair. And as I said, teacher scaffolding becomes very, very important here. And then we move towards independent work by children. So now children practice what has been taught individually, and they really apply what has been taught and what have they gathered or understood or learned. So they really apply it. And then another element is formative assessments. Teacher would thoroughly, throughout the lesson or at different intervals within the classroom or over a period of time, would do formative assessments to see how much of what she's taught or he's taught has been understood, what needs to be retaught, or if certain children in the classroom really need to be engaged further. So that's how I look at it.
Thanks, Supriya. I think that's a great way of presenting the essence of a structured pedagogy approach. But now I'd like you to expand on this further and tell the audience about what is Language and Learning Foundation's specific structured pedagogy approach and what happens in different key elements of this.
Thank you for that question, Dhir. This question is really close to me because I have worked here for a long time and I have engaged in structured pedagogy design. The first part or the first step of structured pedagogy design at LLF is really developing, co-developing a learning framework, which is the scope and sequence. What scope and sequence really is, it is a week by week, day by day mapping of what is to be taught. So the objective, how is it to be taught? So really the activities that needs to be done, and what TLMs should be used to achieve the learning outcomes or the lesson objective of that day. So that's the first part of it. And then this really big framework which is at the principal level is now broken down into what should happen daily in the classroom. So how should instruction really look like on a day-to-day basis or a period-to-period basis? So if I have to give an example, so let's say if we have grade 1 and in a particular state, you have 3 periods for literacy instruction divided into 40, 40 and 40, a period of 40 minutes each. So what happens is that you will have a dedicated time for oral language development and textbook work in the first period, so a 40-minute there, which is then followed by decoding practice, a lot of practice using the materials that is in the classroom, and workbook practice. So the teacher has really taught the competency and the skill and reinforced the understanding of it through workbook, through the practice of it. And then there is reading practice. So a lot of time is dedicated for children to be able to read, and a practice time is dedicated within the instructional time. And writing is done in 2 ways. So one is expressive writing, the other is skill writing through workbook and stuff. An important part of what LLF does well is really embedding differentiated instruction in the instructional design. So depending on how much time do we get in different states, we have, say, a weekly remediation plan to a daily remediation plan. And teachers are expected, and there are guidelines provided to teachers to support struggling learners on a daily basis so that they are not left far behind and they are able to move with the grade. So that's really how the structured pedagogy design of LLF looks like.
Right. I've also heard about something called a 4+1+1. And could you explain that?
Yes. So the 4+1+1 is the teaching cycle that we have at LLF. So a teaching cycle is of 6 days. These are not Monday through Saturday, but this is any day.
6 teaching days.
Yeah, 6 teaching days. It can begin on any day. The first 4 days of this teaching cycles are the days dedicated to teaching of new skills. So any new content, any new concept, any new competency are taught in the first 4 days, followed by a 5th day wherein we have structured revision. So what happens is whatever has been taught in the last 4 days and before that is revised in a very structured manner. And on the 6th day, we have formative assessment, a one-on-one assessment that the teacher administers with the child. And basis how have children perform, the teacher differentiates 2 proper groups. One is the group that has really acquired the competency or the skill, and the one which is lagging behind. The teacher uses 20 minutes or weekly half an hour to work with the children who are lagging behind really very closely with them. So that's the 4+1, 4+1+1 for us.
Thank you, Supriya. That was a very detailed description of how a structured pedagogy approach actually happens in practice. Thank you for that.
And then I have a follow-up question to my response for you. We have heard a lot of critique about structured pedagogy, that structured pedagogy is limiting and does not do justice with teachers and classroom practices. What are some of these concerns that you know of, and how would you want to respond to some of these concerns?
Yeah, this is an important question. And often some of these critiques arise whenever there's talk about structured pedagogy. I'll try and address this in 3 parts. The first is the apprehension that structured pedagogy severely limits teacher autonomy. The second is the feeling that a structured pedagogy is a uniform kind of decontextualized approach. And the third, that it does not address flexible pace of learning in the classroom. So take the first one. People assume that structure automatically means rigidity and that it undermines teacher autonomy and that structured pedagogy is very prescriptive. Actually, a structure helps to ensure that most teachers include the most important activities, materials, and assessments most of the time. That is, it is done consistently on a daily basis. That's the importance of structure. And a structure, therefore, promotes equity because then most children receive a guaranteed set of minimum teaching and learning strategies and activities and materials on a daily basis. I believe that structured lesson plans or a sequence of well-defined activities are not like handcuffs, but more like guardrails for the teacher. I'll take an example. You mentioned reading. We know that for children to learn to read, it should begin with modeling of fluent reading by the teacher, where, of course, there should be a lot of scope for comprehension and interaction, to be then followed by a shared reading practice where teacher and children read together, and then getting children to read on their own with guidance from the teacher, which we say guided reading, and then children reading independently in pairs or on their own. Now, this kind of structure needs to be provided for, and it helps the teacher then follow what is good practice, what is evidence-based practice. It is true that good teachers can do much more than this and already do more than this. They innovate constantly. They build positive relationships with children. They also, bring in children's classroom, home experiences, context into the classroom. But a structured pedagogy ensures that most teachers at least implement a good set of activities that are going to benefit most of the children to learn. So when people say that structured pedagogy limits autonomy, I gently push back and say it provides structured flexibility. It actively creates space for meaningful autonomy. So the key words are structured flexibility and meaningful autonomy. It frees the teacher from the burden of deciding everything that should happen in the classroom because it provides a basic structure. And then the teacher is able to look at actual classroom situations and adopt and adapt what needs to be done on that particular day. The second point about uniformity. LLF's approach to structured pedagogy has never been of one size fits all. It has been responsive and flexible to particular contexts. For example, you're aware that we work a lot in regions like Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Jharkhand, where children's home languages are different. And the instructional design that is prepared in these situations where we are talking of a bilingual or a multilingual approach is quite different from what will happen in other areas. So it is a flexible approach to structured pedagogy, of course, defining a structure in those situations. I'll end by saying that while there is a core instructional strategy and architecture that is based on a strong evidence of how children learn to read and write and learn early numeracy, there is a significant scope for adaptation. On the last issue of pace of learning, as you yourself described, there is scope for daily revision, reinforcement, and remediation, as well as on a weekly basis and a periodic basis. So that is helpful in ensuring that a teacher is able to work with all children according to their pace of learning.
Thank you, Dhir, for responding to this question. I think you have really addressed a lot of these critiques properly. So over to you.
Thanks, Supriya, for this conversation, but we can't end it before understanding what are the challenges of implementing structured pedagogy at scale. I know that you've been spearheading this in a number of states, and you really know what are the challenges at the classroom level and at other levels. So can you explain to our audience what are the challenges in implementing this at scale?
Well, I think, yes, we should not have had concluded this conversation before talking about challenges. Otherwise, we would have really given a rosy picture. Talking about some of the challenges, I will begin with mentioning multi-grade classrooms. We know many and a major section of our Indian classrooms have multi-grade situation where a teacher is really required and expected to be doing justice with 2 grades or more than 2 grades at one time. The structured pedagogy plan and design is, it is designed in such a way that it can cater to one grade at a time because it is competency based, period based. So what happens, for example, let's say if we have a teacher handling grade 1 and grade 2 at the same time, maybe in grade 1 she'll be expected to be teaching decoding skills, while in grade 2 the same teacher will be expected to be doing comprehension skills, will be working on comprehension skill of children. How do you figure out a balance? We are not saying that teachers don't do it, but we really need intentional design change wherein we are able to really put these two together in terms of how will a teacher really work with grade 1 and simultaneously support grade 2, where most of the children are working on their own and the time on task is really high. So how does this be a part of the design itself and a teacher is not left to thinking? So that's the first part of it.
But I do know that some of this is being attempted in some
Yes.
of some of the states
Yes.
on a multi-grade teaching designed for structured pedagogy.
Yes, Haryana is one of the examples. So yes, but what we are primarily trying to say that intentional design change has really kicked in, and we have to really learn from what is happening on the field and provide a structure at scale. How would structured pedagogy really work at scale even when there is multi-grade situation? So that's the direction that we have to move in. The second challenge that I really see and we face quite often at LLF and maybe across is infrequent teacher training or short duration of teacher training. So, and these teacher training that I'm talking about is generally the face-to-face teacher training. While we do have provision of different digital content, but what we believe is that face-to-face teacher training time is really crucial, because that's the time when teachers come together, do a hands-on practice of activities, what is to be taught and how, really the how of it. In different states and at different times, the challenge that we find or we struggle with is either they are infrequent or the duration is too short, with big sizes of teacher training cohorts. So you will have maybe 50 teachers in one room or maybe beyond. So then how do you ensure that every teacher had an opportunity to really practice the different skills and teaching of these skills? So that is a challenge.
Maybe we are trying with different states to support that with other ways in which we can support teachers through cluster meetings, through sending out WhatsApp nudges, or getting teachers to do some short online courses. But I agree with you that a good face-to-face training where there's enough scope for demonstration and practice is really crucial. So these other strategies to ensure continuity in teacher professional development might help in these cases. However, face-to-face teaching is, of course, very important.
So moving on, the third challenge is deep-seated teacher beliefs about how teaching and learning really happens. Some of these beliefs are intergenerational, highly socialized, and it will take time, and rightfully so, for teachers to give way to progressive pedagogy, as we say. So let's say choral repetition being one of the examples. In number of classes that we have visited, that we regularly work with, we do see choral repetition is an important classroom instructional routine. The other is really a teacher doing most of the talking in the classroom, while we know that it is the children who has to do most of the talking. But we are also mindful and hopeful that because these are so deep-seated, deep-rooted, it will take time.
Okay, Supriya, we are coming towards the end of this conversation, but we can't end on the note of challenges. I'd like to understand from you, because you've been so closely associated, how do you see structured pedagogy to be evolving in future, and how do you see its implementation at scale with impact on children's learning?
I see a hopeful picture, Dhir. I see that there's a lot of hope in structured pedagogy. The first and foremost reason being teacher adoption. So when we teacher adoption followed by and accompanied by system adoption also. When we enter into the classrooms, what we see, and it is a heartening picture, is that teachers have really started adopting key elements of structured pedagogy lesson plans. We see a little more conversation in the classroom than probably we saw when we began with it. We saw teachers providing really wait time for students to speak and articulate. And one of the important things that I see during these classroom observations is that teacher really accepting responses and not giving in her own response. And a lot of open-ended conversations happening in the classroom. While all of this is true, what is also true is that there is a long way to go. So that's one part of it. The other part of the future is that structured pedagogy is really not a fixed blueprint. It will evolve, and it is evolving with time. It is not etched in stone. So depending on contextual challenges, depending on the need of a particular state or a particular geography, there are changes in the structure. What I really gather is that there's a lot of hope in tweaking structured pedagogy practices or the entire structure depending on who is it meant for? So that's the second part of it. And also evidence generation, a lot of consultation, dialogue with teacher practitioners who really are at the core of making it a success. So doing a lot of consultation, gathering a lot of evidence from the ground to really see and say that, yes, this works, this really doesn't, and probably of certain fixed things would need some tweaking.
I think that is the key, to always be understanding what's happening on the ground and consulting teachers to see what should change and what should evolve.
Yeah.
That's great.
So with that, Dhir, we have come to the end of the episode, and it is really time to close the day today. Thank you for joining, Dhir, and all the discussion that we had, really classroom anecdotes that we shared. I hope it will be really enriching for our audience. It will provoke a lot of questions and will move for us to really dig deeper into learning about structured pedagogy. Thanks everyone for joining us today and hanging out with us in this discussion. Stay tuned. Until then, take care, goodbye, and see you soon.
Thank you, Supriya. Thank you, LLF.
Thanks, Deep. Thanks.